Alrighty, we're going to continue on talking about some polynomial equations. This time, they're going to be really specific ones. First degree is just a fancy way for saying that they're only going to have plain x, no x squared. So you can see all the equations I gave us don't have like an x squared, x cubed. They just have an x. And then some of them also have a y. So we're going to be looking at equations like that. All of these are in terms of business applications, so hopefully things that are applicable to your major. So we're going to dive right in to these first couple of examples. So I've given you equation in number one. I've actually given you equation in all of them. And you're going to have to do some work based off of that equation. So for this first one, we are given the healthcare expenditures by that equation, where x is the number of years. So x is the number of years after 2015. And we want to determine in which year the healthcare expenditures are 11.8 trillion. So if I'm supposed to determine the year, that means I'm supposed to find x. So my answer is going to be x equals something. So that means I'm going to put 11.8 in for E, the expenditures, and I'm going to leave the x in the problem. And I've got trillion written out there in words. That's kind of a key that you don't need to put all those zeros in there for trillion. We're just going to leave it as 11.8. It also says up here that it's in trillions of dollars. So kind of two ways to know that we're not going to be putting those zeros in. So I'm going to set my equation equal to 11.8, and then I'm going to do a little bit of algebra to solve for this guy. I'm trying to get x by itself. So I'm going to subtract the 3.82 from both sides. So I'm going to get 7.98 is equal to 0.3472x. I'm trying to get x by itself. So I'm going to divide by what's in front of it. So that 0.3472. Type that in my calculator. And I get this decimal. Now with years, we don't want to follow regular rounding rules. We're going to do something called truncating instead, where we're going to look just at the whole number, so not the decimal. I know that if we followed regular rounding rules, this would round to 23, but we want to know what year this happened in. It happened sometime in the year, the 22nd year. Now it's 22.9, so that's probably really late in the year, like December of that year, but it still happened in that year. So we're not going to round, we're instead going to truncate. We're going to look at just the whole number. That's not a year, but I was told that x is the number of years after 2015. So that means I started at 2015, I went 22 more years. So my final answer is the year 2037. All right, let's look at another example that's going to be very similar, except for this time we're going to have to do a little bit more algebra. The equation in this example too, we're going to have to do a little bit of distributing with our work. So I've given you another equation. This time y is going to stand for our money, our billions of dollars. And then the year x, the x is the year here. We want to find the year, so we're supposed to find x, in which we're making $748.6 billion. So remember, y is in billions of dollars. So I'm going to put y as 748.6. So I'm going to leave the x, and instead of y, I'm going to put 748.6. And then I'm going to kind of reduce this down. On the left-hand side, I've got to distribute. So I'm going to get 115.7x. I've got to distribute 115 times negative 2010. And then on the right-hand side of the equation, I'm just going to type all that in my calculator. There aren't any variables, so I'm just type the whole thing in my calculator, the way that I see it. Now, just like above, I'm going to solve for x. Using my algebra rules that I'm bringing in from high school. Oops. So that's going to be equal. Our number's getting big. That's okay. I know they're not pretty, but we have to, it's still all right. Gotta feel comfortable with it. My last step is to divide by whatever's in front of x. Now again, this gave me a decimal when I typed in my calculator. We are not gonna round. We are going to just truncate. So it's the year 2031. I did not have to add anything to this one. Nowhere up in the directions did it say since the year 2015 or 2000 or whatever the year might have been. So I get that year, I get 2031. That looks like a year. There was nothing in the directions about adding, so I'm going to leave it as 2031. All right, number 2 is going to work very similar. Number 3 is going to work very similar to number 2. I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint on here. The 68%, I'm going to change to 0.68. So I'm just going to change it to the decimal 68. Most of the time, there are going to be a few exceptions, but most of the time we're going to want to change those percents to decimals. So I'm going to ask for you to pause it. See if you can set this one up. It works very similar to number 2. Try to solve it and then hit unpause and we'll come back and work it. All right, let's see if you got the same answer that I did. I'm going to plug in that 0.68 in for y. I'm looking for the year, so I'm looking for x. I'm going to do a distributing similar to what I did up above. And then when I type in that right side of the equation, I get 3.56. Pulling out my algebra tools to move over terms. Don't be scared by the negative. It's going to work itself out in the end. I know in the end we can't have a negative answer, and sometimes people get a little nervous, but stick with it until you get there to the end. Remember, we're just going to we're not going to round. We're just going to keep our solid whole number year there.